Oh no, hellos and welcome back to another videos. And today it's gonna be a special top 10. Yeah, so this is gonna be rating the just basically the most broken cards in standard. And I know, guys, I wanted to make my favorite cards of the standard rotation, and we're probably gonna be doing this every rotation from now on because Zendikar Rising is coming up, and that's when the set rotates officially. So we gotta get these cards out of the way for the top 10 and see what are the broken cards. Now, funny enough, there are 10 banned cards currently in Standard. So, what do you think this list is going to contain? All the banned cards of Standard, basically. So we're going to go through the top 10 cards of what was banned in Standard, what was the most broken, basically. And we'll just be going into that. And boy, wasn't there a lot of broken cards. There's 10 of them, so, I mean, any number shouldn't be good for Standard. It should just be 0. Um, Honestly, Standard should never have any bannings in any circumstance. Like, the first time I played Standard, I think the only card I thought was banned was Rampaging Ferocidon in Ixalan's block. That was the only card ban I saw. I could be wrong, though, but who knows, you know. Anyways, let's just move on to the list with number 10, which, yeah, people might have not saw this card, but I'm going to show it to you anyways. It's Once Upon a Time. Yes, so Once Upon a Time, this card was banned for some odd reason. And I put this on number 10 because I just didn't think it really saw play anywhere else after it was banned. So it did see play for a little while in Titan decks and Modern, but Titan decks quickly didn't want to run this that much anymore. I think some still do, but I barely see them anymore. So what is this? It's a 1 green for an instant. But here's the important part. If this spell is your first spell you cast this game, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Now that can actually be a really good card in itself if you didn't have to pay the cost of it. And what it does is it'll look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So yeah, okay. I mean, it's okay selection of fixing cards, but I've seen better. There's still Dig Through Time, there's still Treasure Cruise, there's still those stuff. But this can be a really good card if you can cast it without paying its mana cost. Now, the reason this card got banned is because it fixed colors in Standard, and they didn't actually really like that. Well, why not just ban all the dual lands if that's the case? So I just don't know why they banned this card. They said something about Flash, and they can get their colors better. But honestly, I really don't see the connection to that. Now, I could be wrong. It could just be the color fixing, like they said earlier, but I think it was Flash. But who knows? I mean, I just don't see why this card was banned. But it's banned, so I can't play it. I wish I can, but I couldn't. So, you know what? We'll give this a pass on if it's broken or not. Honestly, I think it's kind of a fair card, and it does have a lot of flavor to it. Especially like the first part of the flavor, Once Upon a Time, and you cast this without paying its mana cost because that's your first spell, Once Upon a Time. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. There's kind of a flavor thing, but the rest are not going to be so flavorful. And because number 9 is not a flavorful card at all, but it kind of is. Growth Spiral. So no surprise to anyone. Some people might be mad that I put this on number 9, but come on, this list was really hard for me to actually deduce. So yeah, so this is a Simic for an instant, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Alright, that doesn't seem so bad. What's the problem here? Well, the problem here is that it's common. That's the only problem I see. So yeah, there's stuff like Explore, there's stuff like, you know, there's that commander that does the annoying thing that when you play a creature you drop a land. So this is kind of that in instant speed form and cheaper. So why was Growth Spiral banned? Well, this was recently banned actually because ramp decks were way too powerful. I know, surprise, surprise. Well, you just printed Cultivate, so I don't know why you banned this card. Might as well just ban all the ramp in general at this point. So the reason why this was banned is because it was played a lot in like any ramp deck it could possibly see playing. This was basically the most played ramp card, and they just wanted to get rid of one of Ramp's biggest threats, which was this card for some reason. Not Ugin, not Nissa, no. Growth Spiral. We're gonna go with that one. Yeah, okay, sure, Wizards. So yeah, this card was just broken in itself, and it doesn't really see play outside of Standard and Modern. It might see play a little bit in Modern or Pioneer, but that's it. But overall, I think it's also a fine card to keep unbanned. I would think this card could also be unbanned, to be fair. And I'm going to agree with the next card also. And then that'll be it for me saying, okay, these cards deserve to be unbanned. But this one's kind of a controversial one, so let me guys know what you think about number 8, which is Cauldron Familiar. Okay, I know you guys are upset, but bear with me in this one. So, Cauldron Familiar, you guys all seen this, the cat combo. I kind of predicted that this card would actually be good and would combo with its counterpart. So let me just read it for you. It's 1 black for when Cauldron Familiar enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. Okay, what's the problem there? Well, the problem is the second part. It says sacrifice a food, return Cauldron Familiar from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, what's so good about that? Well, there's a certain card in particular called Witch's Oven. And what you can do with Witch's Oven and Cauldron Familiar is every turn, your opponent basically has a clock, a 20-point clock. And it could be more if they get out more Witch's Ovens. So yeah, you could see why this card was banned, but I think they banned the wrong card. The card they should have banned was Witch's Oven. The reason why they didn't ban Witch's Oven is they wanted sack decks to be good, but lately I've been seeing actually sack decks being bad without this card, because sack didn't really have a win con unless it was this win con, the cat cauldron combo. So I knew this would be a problem, and I actually went over it of how it would be a problem. And actually, my friend and buddy Cinder showed off what the deck can do and how broken it can be and how annoying it could be. So the reason why this was banned is because it made games way too long and way too dragged out. Not because of its effect, but what it can do throughout the game. Now, Wizards gives a different statement on why this card was banned, but I think that's BS. Honestly, I think that's the only reason why this card was banned is because of Witch's Oven. Witch's Oven just really made the deck so broken in general. But now most sack decks use Claim the Firstborn and the Oven, so that way they take your creature and then they sack it, and you don't get it back until the end of the turn. So you never get it back. It just goes to your graveyard. And that's what sack decks have been doing lately. Not with the cat anymore. The cat is just annoying. Let's just point that out. And yeah, so after this, the rest of the cards will just basically be, I think they should stay banned and be banned forever. But people could disagree. Because number 7 is Agent of Treachery. Oh yes, it wouldn't be a list without this card. So people might not know this card as well if they're just getting into Standard, but let's read what it actually does. So Agent of Treachery is a 5 blue for a creature human rogue. When Agent of Treachery enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent. Okay, what? Okay, excuse me. No non-land, just a permanent. Anything. So you can see why this is broken, but I'll tell you why this earned number 7 in a moment. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. Okay, so why was this card banned? People are going to be saying, oh, reanimate. Duh, that's why. It's a good reanimator target. You're partially right, but partially wrong. Agent of Treachery is actually banned because it made Winota decks way too powerful. Because all Winota had to do was screen with a bunch of non-creatures, may that be tokens or something. And basically, if Winota got to swing once with her army, she basically won the game because you can get out an Agent Treachery and put it on the battlefield for free. And the enter the battlefield ability was key to making this deck good because they run a lot of blink effects to blink Agent of Treachery. And you can see why that can get kind of degenerate. You see? And also there was a deck called Jeskai Luca, where it could actually cheat the Agent of Treachery into play with Luca's second ability. And this deck also saw the way to basically Agent of Treachery getting banned because there was two decks basically playing Agent of Treachery. And when two decks had different archetypes with the same card, you know it's going to be broken. But after that, Agent of Treachery didn't really see play anywhere else. I see it in Modern time to time, but it's not that prevalent. But yeah, Agent of Treachery was just kind of just one of those degenerate cards in the Standard of the time. It was just really, really annoying to deal with, and people didn't like it, so it got banned. And alright, we're going to move on to number 6, and this is going to be another controversial one people are going to be arguing about. But I put number 6 as Veil of Summer. So it's a 1 green instant. Draw a card if opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. Spells you control cannot be countered this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and black until end of turn. Okay, a bunch of text. But let me explain why this earned number 6. Now, I really wanted to put this kind of number 7 and make Agent of Treachery number 6, but I gave it number 6 because I saw a prevalence of this card being used. Now, Veil of Summer is actually a more powerful card than you think. Now, people think it's just a waste, it looks like a sideboard card, it's not going to do much. But it can do a lot. It can do more than you think. It does make the thing that would still go off is spells you control cannot be countered this turn. Spells you control cannot be countered this turn. Keep that in mind. And Veil of Summer saw play in sideboards of green decks, and it also just saw mainboard play because it was that good. And it had to get banned in Standard because of how powerful this card can be in green decks. It made green decks way too powerful, and it made it hard for blue and black decks, the most notorious for bouncing creatures and destroying creatures, basically said, nope, you can't counter my stuff and you can't destroy my stuff. It basically meant this was basically the trap card for all green decks to run against blue and black decks. So they just said, we're going to ban it. It just seems way too powerful. Now, bear with me. This is why I put it on number 6. This actually sees still some play in Vintage. In fact, it even sees play in mainboard decks in Vintage. Vintage decks like Xerox actually run this card in some variants. Now, I have also seen some decks run it in like Oath of Druids or something like that. It really depends on what you're playing. And it says spells you control cannot be countered this turn. So any spell you play cannot be countered. That's why this sees play in Vintage. A lot of decks actually don't run a lot of like the traditional blues counterspells besides Force of Will, okay, and Daze. But some decks actually play Pyroblast, especially in red decks. Now, what Veil of Summer can do is basically stop those Pyroblasts from happening because they can't counter the spell. Of course, they could still destroy it, but even then, you just basically said, I get to resolve this. Try to counter Pyroblast, not gonna work, not gonna work. So a lot of Xerox decks run this. Even as a main board, just to get your non-creature spell count going, and just to get another spell out of the way. Veil of Summer is just still sees play today in Vintage, and I don't think it's ever going to stop seeing play. It's probably one of the best uncommons ever printed. I can't even think of one uncommon that's even better than this. I really can't. So yeah, just a bunch of broken crap. And number 5 is going to be proving kind of our points of what broken crap looks like. So number 5, we have Teferi Time Raveler. Oh god, and I hate this card. And why'd I put it on number 5? I don't know. I thought the other 4 were pretty broken too. So Teferi Time Raveler is a 1 white blue legendary planeswalker. For each opponent can't cast spells, only time they can cast a source. So you cannot cast a spell on your opponent's turn. Basically, it's what it's saying. So instant speed spells don't work anymore. It only works on your turn, and you can only play one instant spell only during your turn. You can't play 2 at a time. Nope. You can't copy spells. Nope. Everything is shut down. And Teferi decks, Teferi Time Raveler, well, not Teferi Time Raveler decks, but a lot of control decks ran this because it basically would stop other control decks from ruining their plan. So why was this so good, you might ask? And why did it get banned? Well, the simple fact is that this Planeswalker is way too efficient at what it did. It had a really powerful ability on it, and it also had a -3 that gave you so much benefit from it getting basically punched out or even shocked out. Like, it's crazy. So Teferi Time Raveler got banned just because of that reason. Now, it also, in the fact that +1 is no joke either. You play instant speed board wipes. That is no joke, and that is pretty degenerate, if I do say so myself. If this Planeswalker basically stays out for a bunch of turns, you're just not going to win. You're not going to win against this card. This card just develops advantage over time, and you're just not going to win if you can't get rid of this card. That's just what it comes down to. If you can't get rid of this card, it's just going to outvalue you. And yeah, control decks, a bunch of any deck like Jeskai Control, any control deck runs this. They don't even need counterspells anymore. They just need Teferi. And that's actually why control decks saw basically barely any counterspells in their deck, besides a couple, but most of them just run Teferi. They wouldn't even need to run the counterspells because the counterspell was Teferi. Because the other opponent couldn't counter your spells. I mean, what could they do? They can't do anything. They could twiddle their thumbs, but they can't counter a spell. So that's why Teferi was banned. It just made games just way too like focused on Teferi, just killing him, and that's why he got banned. And I hate him. I really hated this Planeswalker for a long while. But I also hated this enchantment because number 4 is, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Fires of Invention. Now people are going to be upset that this wasn't like higher on the list, but bear with me. I'm going to go into why. So, Fires of Invention. Okay, so it's a 3-red enchantment. So, and there's a really big downside. You gotta read this. You can cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. That's kind of a big downside, but let's read the rest of the card. You may cast spells with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control. Okay, what's wrong with that? Without paying their mana cost. Holy crap. So what you could do is you basically cheat on colors. And that's why this card saw play. It got to cheat on colors. And you can cast 2 spells in 1 turn. So you're thinking to yourself, what can you do with it? You can't really do much with this. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this, trust me. Now, there was a lot of broken creatures in the standard of its time that this saw play, and you can usually only cast 1 spell. The other part of what you can do is you still have untapped mana. So what you could do with that mana is paid into activated abilities. This could be like something like Kenrith. Yeah, Kenrith. This could be like Cavalier. This could be all those freaking creatures that you see. And Fires of Invention wasn't really used as a downside at that point. Now, why Fires of Invention were so good is because of the way this is worded. It did not matter if the color was wrong. Basically, every deck can play 5 colors with this card out. You can cast whatever you want, basically, and it didn't matter about the mana cost or anything. This just wasn't a big enough downside, and I think Wizards really made the mistake that they should have just went with the simple plan that, okay, maybe it shouldn't be like it shouldn't be 2 spells, maybe it should only be 1 spell. And that's the big mistake. They really wanted to push this card, and they just made a terrible mistake. And it should have said, with the color of lands you control, you can only cast those colors. And they didn't take into consideration of you can just build a 5-color deck with Fires of Invention. You don't really need to run any color fixing at that point. It just made it just not a given because you didn't even need to run any color fixing at all. This was the color fixer. And that's why this thing got banned. It really sounding sad to say that. Because I'm going to move on to the next card and I'm going to be even more disappointed. Because number 3 is Worldliness Reclamation. And yeah, this is why I put Worldliness Reclamation on number 3. And I'm going to explain to you why. It's still played, but not in standard. But you'll see why I say it's still played. So Worldliness Reclamation is a 3 green enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. Oh boy. So this card is banned, okay, for that reason. Honestly, you can untap your lands at the end of your turn. So I actually built a deck called Creation Reclamation. And this revolved around storming off a bunch of spells on the end of your turn. And you got advantage because you got to draw cards every time you cast a spell. So what I would do is build up a value engine of cards, and even if they go to the graveyard, that's fine. I still have my win con. And my win con was either like Jace or Thassa's Oracle, or I just outvalue them with card draw. And that's how I kind of broke the deck. But of course the deck was used mainly to get just experiment and just blast your opponent with a big that X spell. Just blast them with that. Or hey, I mean you could even like hold up your mana for counter spells or anything like that. It was just crazy. And Worldliness Reclamation actually still sees play in Modern and in Pioneer, I think. But mostly in Modern. I mean, it's used for like just for like I think it's like Nexus decks. There's a lot of decks it's used in. I mean, you could use this in basically anything because you just untap all your lands. It's basically a safe card. Once this resolves and it's your end step, this is a safe card. And that's why I kind of like this more than Fires of Invention, because Fires of Invention can get blown up and after that you're kind of screwed. Not really, but you're kind of screwed. With Worldliness Reclamation, the damage has been done once you pass the turn, and they finally destroy your Worldliness Reclamation. You untapped with your land, so you can counterspell something. And yeah, that's why this earned number 3, is because it just sees more play than Fires of Invention. And I think the effect is a little bit more broken than Fires of Invention because this doesn't have a downside. Your only downside is you have to wait until your end step. And I don't even think that's big enough downside. So honestly, I say this deserves number 3. But you know what deserves number 2? Field of the freaking Dead. Oh, you thought we weren't going to avoid this card, but we had to run into it somewhere. Somewhere around the land, we had to run into the Field of the Dead. And why is this land not legendary? You see, the way they could have fixed this card is if they made it goddamn legendary. But no, that would be the ultimate fix of this card, and this card wouldn't be banned because it's a legendary. But nope, it's a regular freaking land. When are you gonna find freaking 4 of the Field of the Deads anywhere? You're not gonna find them anywhere. Nowhere. You're not gonna find them nowhere. But anyways, Field of the Dead enters the battlefield tap. Who gives a shit? Tap it, add 1 colors to your mana pool. Who gives a fuck? But here's the most important part of the card, and I can't believe I'm talking about this card. This card just actually recently got banned. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. In freaking Historic, because it was so broken. In Standard it was banned a while, but whenever Field of the Dead or another land, why not just itself, okay? Just so many mistakes, okay? Or another land enters the battlefield under your control. If you control 7 or more lands with different names, create 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. And you know, have a party while you're at it and flip your opponent off, because that's what you basically did with them. So why was Field of the Dead banned? Well, for the simple reason is that you can just ramp until your heart's content. And this deck saw play in Golos lands decks, because Golos actually found your Field of the Dead. It would basically tutor it up and put it into play. Now, this deck actually went a new approach after it was banned at Standard. It actually saw play in Historic. And it saw play with Historic and ramp cards such as Hour of Promise. And you could search up the land, the Infamous land. I think even 2 of them too. And you could search up Field of the Dead, and you can get a bunch of 2/2 zombies onto the battlefield. It was nuts. And this card is just a disgrace to Magic. Uh, This card is like it's not one of the best lands in the game, but it's like up there. It's like up there for one of the best lands in the game. In terms of utility, this is probably one of the best utility lands in the game, but this is just unacceptable. And that's why they're probably not going to make a card ever like this where a land generates tokens. 2/2 black zombies, mind you. But yeah, I mean, what a disgrace to the card. And this actually still sees play today in Landfall Titan. I should just call it Amulet Titan decks. And this, yeah, basically sees play in Amulet Titan. Because if your Titan gets blown up, you could just tutor for this land, and you know your Titan's going to get blown up. But what you could still do is still place lands and get your 2/2 zombies instead of your Titan. It was basically a second way to win. And yeah, this is just a big disgrace. It probably even sees play in Legacy Lands decks too, as another sideboard answer, because if they blow up your, or if they like search for your like Dark Depths, you'd be like, ah, no problem. I still got Field of Freaking Dead. What are you gonna do now, bitch? Nothing. You're gonna sit in the corner and cry. Because that's what I did when I first saw this deck in action. I cried. Like I was like thinking, well, I didn't cry. I'm just joking, boys. But I cried inside. But now, if you thought this was bad, wait until you see the next card because this is gonna be. You probably already saw it coming, guys. If you guys aren't new to the standard thing, but number one, for no surprise at all, it's Oko Thief of Crowns. And yes, I think everyone knows this card. It's an Oko Planeswalker. You can create a food token. A target artifact or creature loses all abilities. It becomes green elk creature with base power 3/3. And he can stay in control of a target artifact, but no one cares about his ultimate because his +1 is probably his best ability. So you're thinking to yourself, why is this broken? It doesn't look broken to me. Oh no, you're wrong. His +2 gives him you life. Okay, that could be a big deal. You can also use his +1 on your +2 food token to make a 3/3 food token, basically. And it's just insane. And this would actually come out turn 2 if you had the goose. And you'd be thinking to yourself, now, that's kind of crazy once you think about it. And yeah, it was. And people really didn't think this card was good, actually. People actually wrote it off as not that good. And some people thought, okay, that's kind of powerful, but, it's not that broken. Once you saw the decks it was played in, and once you saw the interactivity that Oko could do, he soon became really, really broken. Now, the reason I put this on number 1 on the list is simple on the fact, and I'm going to explain to you why is number 1. Oko was in standard for a decent bit, and he actually broke the format real good because he made it really impossible to play the game properly, and Wizards was just not having it. So they had just basically banned this card outright because of how broken it really was. But that really didn't stop Oko from becoming good. And then it saw play in Historic. Well, that was already banned, but it saw play in Pioneer. It was just too good, and it had to get banned because it was just way too good at making, decks having to revolve around Oko and try to kill him. And it just wasn't had healthy format for anything at all. He was even so broken that he even had to be banned in Brawl because he was just way too good of a commander. If he was put out turn 2, you had to deal with this card until you can kill it. And that was kind of hard because it made 3/3 elks each turn. It wasn't easy. And people just didn't see the fact that the +1 can actually be used as a removal. You could just remove a freaking Eldrazi Titan. Alright, you're a 3/3 now. Doesn't even mind you're indestructible. It's like, alright, you're a 3/3 with no abilities. It's like, come on, man. This was even so broken that it actually had to be banned in Modern because of the combination between Urza and this card. It basically made Urza decks way too powerful for its own good, and even Amulet Titan decks, which I've been talking about for most of this video, just was put in there because Oko was just that good. He could be played in anything. And Modern wasn't having it either. And Wizard actually had to ban it from Modern because the card, again, was just way too good for its own good. So they just banned it from Modern. Now, people might think, you know what, that's the end of Oko. He basically broke every format. He broke Modern, he broke Brawl, he broke Standard, he broke Pioneer. What else can this man do? I think he's done with after Legacy and Vintage. You see, not quite. You see that now I've been recently hearing that, okay, Oko's been getting out of control in Legacy. And he's even had his own archetype called Snoko decks, which basically revolve around Oko and snow-based cards. Now, Oko is basically used to kind of gain control of the board, and it could take out those pesky artifacts that people use in Legacy. There's Astrolabe too in this deck. Yeah, it's really that degenerate, really that degenerate. And people are like, all right, he's kind of wrecking Legacy. He's probably one of the top tier decks of Legacy. And honestly, he doesn't stop there. He went to Vintage. And he's kind of good in Vintage. He's played in Oath of Druids decks or in any Planeswalker Rug style deck or Rug Control. And this card is just very solid all around the board, and that's why it has kind of the price point of $20. People just don't understand why it's that expensive. It's because it's just a solidly built Planeswalker. And it's probably one of the best Planeswalkers in the game. It makes freaking Jace look like a fucking baby compared to this. This card can kick its ass like any day. And people thought Jace was like, alright, that's it. Like, Magic's not going to print a more busted version of a Planeswalker. But no, they did. They printed a more busted Planeswalker. Even more busted than, Teferi Hero Dominaria or Jace, Jace the Mind Sculptor. The Boogeyman. That people call, like, Jace the Mind Sculptor the Boogeyman of the whole format. No. This card just shits on it and says, you know what, I'm Oko, I can do whatever the hell I want. And yeah, that's what this card basically did to the whole game for a while. It was even so prevalent that there was a Oko Day, and they wanted to change Mark Rosewater into Mark Elkwater because of how broken this fucking card is. And God, I'm just basically rambling on for, like, I could be rambling on this for hours and hours and hours. I could talk about the whole history of why Oko was really broken, but at last we're at the end of the top 10 of this rotation. Guilds and Core Set 2021. So yeah, it's just top 10 most broken cards in Standard of this time. And I'm really saddened to say that 10 cards actually got banned in Standard. And that shouldn't be a number we should ever have to get to. And I hope I don't actually have to make a list where I have to say that every card on here is broken and banned. I wish I could say, like, 0 cards were banned. But, we're living in a time of Magic where they're really trying to push the power level, and they should just kind of leave it the same like they did in Ixalan. And I really liked Standard Ixalan days. I really missed that. But unfortunately, this is kind of going to just be what the new Magic is going to be like. It's just going to be kind of about, power creep and stuff. We have other cards that are kind of creeping into that kind of territory, like Uro is kind of becoming a card of discussion, And it's really sad to see this, like, card game go into this kind of Yu-Gi-Oh style power level, It's just, not right. It's supposed to be kind of about fantasy and lore, and I get it. Oko kind of fits that. I really like his flavor. In fact, he's probably one of my favorite Planeswalkers of all time. But just to see him be broken, like they should have made the +1 just a 0 or a negative. It's just baffling to me why they would, power up Oko so much. But anyways, guys, enough of my rambling. That's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day or night. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Bye. In peace.